Mike Naig was elected as the 15th Iowa Secretary of Agriculture in November 2018. As the Iowa Secretary of Agriculture, Mike is focused on expanding our markets, promoting careers in agriculture, and improving water quality and land stewardship. Mike is committed to leading efforts to expand economic opportunities for Iowans and is an advocate on behalf of the hardworking men and women who help feed us. Mike is a graduate of Buena Vista University in Storm Lake and degrees in biology and political science. He and his wife Jamie have 3 boys. So thank you for being here so much.
Thanks, Logan. Am I on? Very good. I have to fight the urge every time I'm here to preach while I'm up here, or with this kind of nifty headset, I feel like I might be selling knives at the state fair too. So if I break out into my sales pitch, let me, don't be offended here. And also, truly, if you need to get up and use the restroom, make sure you do that. I know you've been sitting for a little bit. Roads aren't great out there, but it's great to see you all. And we kind of crept our way across on 80. It wasn't too bad, but there were a few times where we were down to 25, 30 miles an hour. But we appreciate those DOT plows on a day like today. Well, I want to just spend a couple minutes here talking about, looking back, 2020, of course. We have to talk about it. We may not want to talk about it, but we got to talk about it because there's lots of things that we did learn and some good things that happened. And we want to pull all those lessons forward that we can. And then we want to forget about the rest of it as soon as we possibly can. But of course, we're thinking a lot about what next. 2021, we're agriculture people, and so we tend to be optimists, right? And so we're liking what we see in terms of markets. I really appreciated the last presenter. I think I've got to make a few decisions myself here about what's coming up this year and what we think markets are going to do. But we also have got a bit of a dampening effect going on in terms of policy, right? There's a change in administration, and this happens every 4 years. Even if an administration stays in Washington, there's a certain amount of churn every 4 years and some new faces and new priorities. And so this is kind of a thing that we do every 4 years, but every time there's a change in administration, from party to party especially, there's a lot of moving pieces to watch. And so I'll talk a little bit about that, and then would be happy to answer any questions that you've got. 2020, of course, how many ways can we talk about it? I like to say, it was an unprecedented challenge, of course, to each of our lives, but of course to agriculture. Agriculture hasn't been immune from that. Unprecedented disruption to our supply chain. We think back, any of livestock producers in the state, that we had a processing disruption back in May, June time frame. We typically process around 150,000 pigs in the state of Iowa any given day. We were running about 40 to 50% capacity during those times, which meant animals were backing up on farms. And at the peak of that, we were about 600,000 hogs had missed their normal marketing window, and about 100,000 cattle. And so that was creating issues on farms. Took a lot of creativity and innovation on the part of our producers, and a lot of resiliency to work through that. And we saw a massive shift, of course, from supply chains that normally deliver a certain amount of food to to food service and restaurants, and then a certain amount of food that goes into the grocery and retail sector. And what did we do with that whole supply chain this year, right? The bottom fell out of the food service side of things, and demand dramatically increased in retail, and there had to be a massive shift to accommodate for that. Well, in addition to those unprecedented market disruptions due to COVID, of course, then we dealt with historic weather conditions in the state of Iowa as well, a derecho that not an unusual, it's not a new phenomenon in terms of weather, but the size and the scale and the severity of this one was historic and unprecedented. So we saw it develop in southern South Dakota and travel all the way to western Ohio. In the state of Iowa, several million acres, 3.5 million acres of corn and 2.5 million acres of soybean were in that hardest hit area that was damaged. And then, of course, drought. And you all know it's dry. And it's especially dry in western Iowa this time. And it wasn't so long ago that we had a lot of drought down in this area. But 99% of the state of Iowa at one point or another last year had some level of drought classification. And so we're dry historically heading into this year. And that's something, of course, that we're watching very, very closely. I want to acknowledge, and I know the governor was intending to be here, but it's important that you all know that she has shown tremendous support for the agriculture community all throughout. When other states, I was getting calls from colleagues about, hey, how are you going to handle ag workforce, and can those folks go to work? Are they essential workers? I tell you, it was about one of the shortest conversations I've had with the governor about that topic, all the way back in March. What do you think should be done with our ag workers? And without a doubt, she considered our agriculture workforce from beginning to end to be essential, and we weren't going to be locking those folks down and stopping them from moving about their business. And then provided some significant CARES Act support for our livestock producers, our beginning farmers, our renewable fuels industry, and of course, to meet the needs of food insecure Iowans. I'm really proud of agriculture, the way the agriculture community stepped up. We've got programs like Pass the Pork, Beef Up Iowa, Turkey to Table, and Pack the Pantry, things that connect our Iowa producers and supply chains with food pantries, food banks all across the state. Really proud of that work, and that will continue. I mentioned the derecho, of course, and there's still some, that's not something you recover from immediately. Of course, there's a lot of damage in counties. Really, again, you can drive from Carroll County to Clinton County and see damage in terms of crops, certainly, but also buildings and homesteads and towns, and so there's going to be a long road to recovery there. I want to talk just a little bit. I'll mention maybe some of the topics that we're looking at here at the state level. Yesterday, the governor released her economic recovery task force report, and I led the ag work group of that, and so this was something that we started back in the late summer, worked through the fall to come up with recommendations. Now, we're very fortunate to be in the state of Iowa, where going into last year, we had one of the lowest unemployment rates in the nation. We ended the last fiscal year in the end of June with a surplus, and our rainy day fund is full. That doesn't happen by accident. You can be thankful that we're in the state of Iowa, and so as we come into this legislative session, when we're looking at the next budget, we're not talking about what cuts we're going to make to keep the lights on in the state of Iowa. We're talking about what can we do in terms of strategic investments to grow Iowa. So that's why we're able to talk about things like broadband and a significant investment, remaining competitive in terms of taxes, pro-family, pro-growth tax policy. And we need to keep those really conservative and smart, fiscally responsible budgeting practices intact as we go forward. So be thankful that we live in a state like we do. So the Ag Work Group, our key recommendations were around driving increased demand for biofuels, to increase the investment in infrastructure to offer higher blends of ethanol, so ethanol and biodiesel. So when you pull up to the pump, that you've got more options, that you can find that higher blend, that E15 and above, B20 and above. We all know that this is a great thing for our economy of Iowa. It means jobs, it means support for prices. It's better for consumers because it's cheaper, and it's better for the environment because it's cleaner burning. This is a win-win-win-win. And so we need to continue to invest in that. Generally, Iowa is a great place for innovation. So we always talk about if you're going to do something in terms of a startup or an innovative product or approach to agriculture, where else in the world would you rather go? We've got world-class research institutions like Iowa State University. We've got an ecosystem that's developing for startups to come, and there's a certain critical mass that's developing around that. And then, as I always like to tell folks that are looking at places to innovate, and we can get you on a farm with one of the most forward-thinking, progressive, innovative farmers in the world within a few minutes. And so you can find out right away, you can get feedback right away, whether the product that you're talking about or the concept you're talking about is going to have any traction. Innovation, startups, remaining focused on water quality and sustainability. Anybody hearing about carbon sequestration? What does that all mean? How do we get our arms around that in a way that, we know, and we're hearing a lot about, whether you pick the company, right? Whether it's the largest retailer in the world, a Walmart, or whether it's Delta Airlines or Chevrolet, or you pick the company. But those companies are out there making claims about wanting to offset either their carbon footprint or to become carbon neutral or what have you. And so how are they going to do that? Well, they're going to have to go buy carbon credits. Well, one way that they can, or they can achieve that carbon neutrality is they can simply just look back down the supply chain and say, you all are going to change how you do things, and we're just going to wait. We'll sit out this end of the supply chain, and we won't buy from you unless you do what we want you to. Or the other way to do that is you participate with the entire supply chain in a way that everybody gets value. The end user gets the value they want by saying that they're achieving certain carbon goals, but those of us, the farmers and the landowners at the beginning of that supply chain, also need to share in that revenue. If the practices are going to change on our farms, then we need to share in the revenue. I think there's a great opportunity for that. We need to make sure agriculture is at the table and that there's predictability, that there's a way that you understand how to participate in that marketplace, that there's proven practices. The science tells us that certain practices will do certain things in terms of carbon sequestration or greenhouse gas reductions, and that there's protection, that you can manage your risk and all of that. There's a lot we don't know about that, I'll just say right now. But how can we be a player in that? And don't forget, renewable fuels is a way today. In every measure, in almost every measure that you can take on the things that we produce a lot of in this state, whether it's in the field or whether it's livestock, protein production, we are moving in the right direction in terms of sustainability. We're better today than we were last year, or a decade ago, or 2 decades ago in terms of our sustainability. So let's not condemn what's been done. Let's recognize that we're doing a lot of the right things, and how can we then capitalize on this opportunity to bring more revenue in. And by the way, if folks have been early adopters of things like no-till and cover crops, we don't think it should just be a line in the sand where from this day forward, these practices are rewarded. There has to be some recognition for the work that's been done, the costs that folks have put out of their own pocket, and there ought to be a way for them to participate as well. Bigger picture from that economic recovery task force, we need broadband investment, we need child care, we need housing, and we've got to stay focused on workforce broadly. I will mention one other thing, and I'm happy to answer questions about this too, but foreign animal diseases will remain a huge part of our focus. We're asking for some extra dollars at the legislature this year for that. I'm going to briefly mention some federal issues, and then I want to make sure we have time for questions. Change in administration, of course. We've got confirmation hearings going on right now in terms of, for the USDA Secretary, Secretary Vilsack. In all likelihood, he's headed for confirmation. It's good for Iowa. It's good to have a Midwesterner there. It's good to have somebody with experience in the administration. Because frankly, one of the key jobs, and we saw Sonny Perdue do this, we saw Tom Vilsack do this before, you need an advocate at USDA who can go to the Department of Defense, the Department of Labor, the Department of Interior, the alphabet soup of federal government, EPA, and represent agriculture and explain the impact on agriculture. And I think we have somebody who can do that, has experience doing that. EPA administrator had a hearing yesterday. We don't know a lot about Michael Regan. Generally what I hear is he's a nice guy, he says all the right things. But we'll see. We'll see. This administration has said they want to do a lot on climate, and we need to make sure that, again, that's a positive for agriculture, not that it drives up our costs or reduce our opportunity to thrive and grow businesses. In addition to, again, making sure we don't have over-regulation, we're going to hear a lot more about waters of the U.S. again, WOTUS. I wish I had a better answer for you on that. I suspect there might be a question out there on that. I think this administration intends to do something to roll back where we are today and have less flexibility. Where are we going to go on taxes? And what does that mean for us in agriculture? The administration ran on raising taxes. I take them at their word. They intend to do that. What are the ways that that can impact us, and how do we need to try to protect and fight for that? Renewable fuels, of course, at EPA, we need somebody to uphold the law, get rid of these small refinery exemptions. We need more access to higher blends of ethanol and biodiesel. There's a lot of things that we can do at the state level and the federal level to do that. Trade, right? My gosh, we've heard about trade the last several years. We've felt some pain. We've seen some benefit. Tell me that China deal is not helping us right now. Tell me that the USMCA is not helping us right now, but where do we go? We know that the China phase one was only a phase one. There's much, much more work to be done there. And now we have to go enforce those trade deals. I don't see major moves from the Biden administration at this point on trade. It's going to take them a while, I think, to get their feet under them on what they want to do. That's okay in my mind, but we've got to continue to look to expand markets. Remember this stat. Iowa is number 2 in the nation in terms of the value of our food and agriculture exports, second to California. So, does trade matter to Iowa? You're darn right it does, especially for anybody that happens to be on the eastern part of the state that's near that, what I like to call that superhighway of the Mississippi that leads right to export markets. And that would be my final kind of thing that we need to be thinking about at the federal level, among a lot of things, but infrastructure. I think there's an opportunity for an infrastructure investment in this country. What we need to ensure is that that infrastructure is the kind of infrastructure that benefits rural America. And a couple of things, of course, roads and bridges, we know those, locks and dams, and broadband. And we should be thinking more about broadband being critical infrastructure. Because my gosh, if we haven't learned anything this year about broadband, we need it. You need it for your businesses, you need it for your farm operations. We need it to teach our kids to remote work and watch the big game on Sunday night too, you know. So you want all those things for it's essential for quality of life. I'm going to stop there because I feel Logan creeping on the stage here, and I want to make sure we get a chance to have some questions. Are you going to ask me questions?
Yes, I have a couple
I
questions.
don't
here
know
from
about
the crowd,
this.
so,
Are they pre-approved? Okay.
They weren't screened beforehand. We did have
Pre-screened questions only.
Some cards in there. The first one talks about payments that we've had. So we've had a couple rounds of CFAP.
Yeah.
We were able to jump into the PPP payments, and
Right.
and that recently, appreciated, needed, whatever that line is. But any thoughts of a CFAP 3 or conversation on that?
Yeah, CFAP 3. So I think right now the answer is we don't know. And so what oftentimes in change of administration, what you'll have is sort of a freeze they sort of walk in and say, let's just stop everything so we can get our arms around it, and then we'll figure out what to do next. So there certainly was, I think, envisioned in previous COVID relief packages done by Congress, or the last one, that there could be some farm assistance, a CFAP 3. I think what the Biden administration has done, and again, this is not unusual in any way, is to freeze that to be able to get their feet under them and look at what to do. I wouldn't expect to hear much about that until Vilsack is actually in place, behind the desk, and then to see. So it would remain to be seen to me, previously, and I'd had lots of conversations with my predecessor, Bill Northey, when he was at USDA. He oversaw a lot of the development of these criteria. You got to show, historically, you've had to show some market impact, and how would you do that? Would you just apply it over acres? Would you have to show some sort of a loss? I don't know what criteria they would use. That would really be left up to USDA. So I think the answer right now is we don't know. We have to wait and see. But I think it's possible.
Even that PPP payment felt a little like a CFAP 3.
Yeah.
Money left over, and we're able to utilize that where it needs to be. Stepped up basis is one that's a pretty popular thought right now, especially with the exchange and the administration. If you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I do, but other than to say that that's exactly the kind of thing, right, that when you're writing tax policy federally and you kind of are waving wands and sweeping things away, that one might look like something that sort of, maybe it makes sense. But then you may not understand the impact on agriculture. You may not understand the fact that when you're in this business, we got dollars tied up in land and equipment and assets. And so, that's a good example of where we've got to make sure that the tax writers, that the policy folks understand the impact on agriculture. So unfortunately, what I'm going to say is that I think everything's on the table. We got to go fight.
Right.
For
Yeah. There's a lot of dust to settle with the current shift in administration. I'm sure. Yeah. Could you please discuss a little bit about ICIA, Iowa Crop Improvement Association, and describe your role and how and what different organizations are responsible for?
Well, crop improvement. Maybe there's a specific question. If you want to grab me on the way out the door, I'm happy to talk. Certified seed, and I'm named on the board of the Crop Improvement Association, and I have somebody represent me on that. So if there's a specific question about it, I'm happy to answer it as we head out the door or get you some follow-up. But important, I think that, especially as we think about, cover crop seed grown here in Iowa, what can that look like? What role can Crop Improvement Association play in that? Again, because we have a huge seed industry in the state of Iowa that don't really talk a lot about. But what would we need to develop in terms of small grains, and what are the opportunities there to have? And of course, we want quality tested seed when we turn around to plant that in terms of cover crops. So if there's a specific question, grab me on the way out. But it's important. I'm on the board.
Good deal. And I'll have one more with my involvement in the Farm Bureau in Scott County. Recently, we had conversations about CAFOs.
Yes.
And that's kind of a hot topic now. And even you mentioned the water highway that we have so close, and what impact our confinement livestock facilities have on these water quality projects, and especially when the ICCI groups and the urban groups are getting really worked up about what we're doing. If you have any comments on that, to share.
Yeah, and I'm aware of what's been going on in Scott County, unfortunately. Look, let's look at the facts on the ground. Yes, we have a lot of livestock in this state, but from an environmental standpoint today, we're better than we've been at any time in our history in terms of environmental stewardship around those facilities. So, I kind of bristle at the suggestion sometimes that agriculture's not regulated. How many of you feel like agriculture's not regulated? Anybody? Wait, was there a hand back there? No, okay. Do we feel like, no, we're not, we're regulated. Livestock in this state is regulated. And so to suggest somehow that it's not is just not, it's not factual. And so now, as an industry and as livestock industry, there are things that we all know that there's sites out there that are perfectly legal, but maybe they're not a great site. And that needs to, that's producer responsibility, and that's an industry that needs to raise the bar. Again, to suggest somehow that we're not regulated, or that we need to shift dramatically the way that we regulate in Iowa, I believe that we need to have a statewide approach to siting facilities, because otherwise you end up with the haves and the have-nots and a patchwork of regulation, and we don't want to see that. And so we'll continue. And I'm going to put one more caveat on this. Now, should we always be willing to look at how we can do things better? You bet. We never should sit and say, now we're just going to dismiss some things out of hand. But that activist voice, I don't think, wants to be constructive.
And I don't have any other questions from my standpoint. So any closing comments, Mike, or anything else?
Well, look, great to be able to join you today and on a snowy day. But where else would you really want to be today, right? Just right here is fine. Keep the snacks flowing and talk to the great vendors here. But always great to get down to this event. And again, we've been through a lot. I think it's weighing on people. I think I keep hearing from folks saying, I'm tired of this. I'm ready to be done. And I think the good news is, as we get into 2021, as we see vaccine rollout, yeah, it's bumpy. There's no doubt about it. Because you know what? It's a numbers game, right? You only have so much vaccine rolling into the state, and you got a lot more arms than you have vaccine. But there's a lot of folks working hard to make sure that we get through those priority folks, and certainly our healthcare workers first, and then into our essential workers, and on down the line. So hang tough. Spring's coming, and I think too that'll help as we start to see the sun and are able to get outside. But I know that we all want to start using the word normal more and more, and so hang with it. And I think we're rounding the corner here. And there's reasons to be optimistic as we think about the agriculture space. I've talked about a lot of the challenges and some of the things I'll just tell you flat out, I don't usually use this term, but I am worried about some of the things that could come at us from a federal level. But we've been here before, and this is where you work together. This is where it's important that we have strong voices, that you all have strong voices representing you in Des Moines, and certainly in Washington. I think we do have, as the state of Iowa, a good team, a good bipartisan team that's out there going to work hard for Iowa's interests. And so we go and we do the work. We go and do the hard work. And I think that's where we are right now, is there's a lot of opportunity. Iowa and agriculture needs to be at the table, and we'll continue to do, I think, what we've done exceptionally well over the years, and that's to make our voice very, very clearly heard wherever it needs to be heard. So just know that that's what we're working on, certainly what I'm working on. So got questions as I leave here, grab me. I am running out the door pretty quick, but if not, I know Logan can get a hold of me and knows how to do that, and he does a lot. So but if you want to get a question to him after I leave, or you want to connect, I'd certainly welcome that. So thanks everybody. Stay safe and stay warm today.
Thanks, Mike.